right, so welcome everybody to another episode of Bones and Stones. Today we're very excited to have Tammy Hodgskiss with us from the Origin Center. She is currently the curator at the Origin Center at Wits University, which is great. Tammy's a previous PhD graduate from Wits, and I think that's kind of where we all met as well, having come through Wits. So today we'd just like to talk a little bit about, Tammy's journey, how she ended up becoming the curator at the Origin Center. And obviously we're very, very excited for her in this new position and stuff. So Tammy, without further ado, we'd like to hear about your journey in archaeology.
Cool. So I think I got into archaeology by chance in first year. I just thought it would be a nice subject to do. And then after my first year, just absolutely loved it. I kind of knew that was my route. And then, all my jobs have kind of along the way, and going to my PhD, working at Sterkfontein and Maraping as a guide for a while, and working in the museum sector on giving workshops about various museum things, and then working at the South African Rock Art Archive for a while, it is. So it's kind of been this kind of pretty straightforward journey. I never saw myself as someone academic, and I've just really, I think once you find a subject that you really like, it's easier to do, and you actually have some passion for it, and then it's easy to put in the time and the work. So it's been mostly at Wits and in Joburg, and I've just really loved it. And then I became the curator in 2018, so it's been 2 and a bit years now, and it's been awesome. I really have loved it. It's been such a varied job, and I think it really works for me I can do a little bit of my research on the side and bring in my own work, but also to be able to deal with people and do this whole mix of things has been really awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. It's really, really interesting. And, it really seems since you started in 2018, I must be honest, I received so many emails from the Origin Center with all the events going on, which is fantastic. It really is good. There's so much going on, and it's so exciting. And I suppose that's going to feed into our discussion on public outreach and stuff. So we'll get to that. But I'm going to hand over to Matt. He's got a question for you.
All right, Tammy. Yeah, so I echo Matt Lauder's sentiments. We've seen a huge increase in activity, both sort of like online through emails and in the Origin Center. And we know a lot of that is probably due to your hard work. So thank you very much. You've had some really awesome things going on at the museum, honoring Revel Mason, which was a really interesting exhibit, and so on and so forth. Anyways. The question I want to ask is surrounding outreach. That's kind of the hot topic in archaeology at the moment. It's about, not just about producing sort of knowledge and about archaeological sites, but trying to involve communities and things like this that might be attached to those archaeological sites. So we just wanted to sort of hear some of your opinions about this. What do you think are the best ways for doing outreach through museums? And what do you think the significance is in just like, sort of society in general?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult with outreach, because you kind of want to reach communities, especially that can't come into it. So we get a lot of schools coming in, and they can visit Origin Center, and you can do so much in the museum, but you want to reach the schools and the people that can't come. And it's quite difficult, because you do need funding, or you need transport, and there's all these other issues that come into it. But we've been able to, on a kind of more personal level, if we just happen to bump into someone at an exhibition and they say, oh, I have this amazing group of people, or we have a feeding scheme. We went to a feeding scheme in Innerdale, which is a community that has a lot of Khoisan roots and are involved with the Khoisan Council. And we've been able to work with them somewhat, but it's kind of been on an interpersonal level, people that we bump into. But I feel there is so much I would love to do. I think we could do so much more. But to just try and get the reach to get people to kind of spark the kids' interest in archaeology and in rock art, and just to try to go outside of Gauteng and around the country and see what we can do. So we also work with Ian Mackay at the ESI, go to the national arts festivals and things like that, or any science fest, and then you get a very different audience as well.
Tammy, thanks. That's really interesting. I'm going to hand over to Tim. He's got a question for you, but maybe just an observation quickly. It definitely seems as if Bodie and Tim go to the same hairdresser.
Oh, we do actually, yeah.
Tim, you got a question?
You can see he loves spatulas. I prefer bright tongs. There are some differences. Yeah, at that point now where I've just given up trying to control my kids during lockdown. Like, okay, you can come while I'm eating, it's fine. So Tammy, I think what's really cool about your position as well is that the Origin Centre is such a great museum. Like, you know, coming from Wits, we've all seen it, we've been to it a number of times. At the short spell I had at Wits when I was doing a bit of lecturing, I brought students in there. It's this amazing resource. And museums like across South Africa can play a really important role, I think, in our history as South Africa. And if you look back at, you know, all the turmoil we've had, all the achievements we've had historically too. So in that context, like what kind of role can universities play within society and changing perceptions about the past and things like that? And especially a place like Origins, which really has its finger on the trigger in terms of that.
Yeah, I think a very big role. Firstly, I mean, I think we can really nicely link all this amazing research that's being done to the public and actually link the academics to the public, but also make show people that this past that we're showing in the museum, or that the past that South Africa has, is relevant to them. And that's something that's often quite hard to do in museums. You know, like you look at it and you go, oh, why does that ostrich eggshell skirt mean anything to me? But to try bring in the personal stories. And I think that's something that's hard to do in museums, and definitely something that we're trying to do more is to go, okay, that's not just a picture of a Khoisan girl, but it's actually, this is her name. And I think it's something that Krista Kuljan spoke about quite a lot in Darwin's Hunch, is actually bringing in those personal stories, and hopefully when people come to the museum and people can interact, they realize that, oh, that might have been my great-great-great-great-grandparent, or this is where my ancestors are from. And so it was quite nice when we did the DNA testing as well, because then people go, oh, okay, maybe I can find out where the family I don't know at all, and none of my grandparents know about, I can find out where my roots are.
Tammy, that's really interesting, and the question I was going to ask, I think, feeds a little bit into that. How do you make sure that the content that is in the museum is relevant and in a form that's digestible for, let's say, young groups, young students, for example, young scholars? Do you work with focus groups? Do you bring in a lot of specialists in these kinds of things? I mean, how does the process work?
Yeah, well, I think at Origins we're very lucky. The museum content itself, I feel, was really well done in the beginning. I mean, the museum opened in 2006, and there's been a few additions, but on the whole, the content is still pretty relevant. And we're looking at ways of how we can have material that can come in and out, and you can update and go, oh, we found these new dates. So we try and tell our guides about, you know, new dating methods for rock art, or some interesting things that have been found in the last few years. But it's quite difficult, because you need to have the content there's enough information for adults and it's complex enough. And we also have audio guides, so you can get more information there. But then you want it to be fun. And I mean, me also having young kids, I want places that kids can interact with, and that means something to students. I mean, we still have most students at Wits haven't been to Origin Centre, and we'll often have students coming in their 4th year or in their postgrad saying, I can't believe I've never been here, or I never knew this place existed. You know, so we're kind of wanting to do things to bring people in, and so that's why we've done other things like have temporary exhibits that are quite different to the museum content, but related. So like when we had the Buddhist monks there, we got a lot of people coming in that hadn't come to Origin Centre before. It was free to get in. And then they could see the space and go, oh, wow, okay, it actually means something to me, or I like the space. But then also having workshops and seminars. So when you work with school groups, we do seminars that are related to the content, so the curriculum, so that they can ask a specialist, have an archaeologist come in and speak to them about Mrs. Pez and show the skull. And so that actually means a bit more if they can ask questions and see the material.
No, absolutely. Just before I hand over to Matt, Matt's got a question for you, but I just wanted to ask, in terms of, these regular events that you are now doing at the museum, do you have regulars coming to those events? People who are there pretty much every weekend or every second weekend?
Yeah, we do. So the public lectures definitely, and it's still generally an older crowd. So we would really like to get students to come in more, but you do have to pay, so that might keep some students away. But we do, and it's really nice to have these regulars back, and you start this nice relationship with the neighboring friends as well. But definitely for the public lectures, but for the exhibitions, we've had such a nice mix. And it also depends on the exhibitors. They have their own crowds that they bring in. Depends on the content. And I mean, the Revel Mason exhibit you mentioned, we had a wonderful crowd for that, and it was so nice because it was the archaeology crowd, but also kind of a whole mix of people that some of them hadn't been to Origin Centre for years, and this gave them a reason to come back.
Awesome. Kara, go for it.
Okay, sorry. Just a quick question. Best and worst parts about your job as a curator?
Sure. So, I mean, I love dealing with people, and that's one of the best parts. And especially now that I'm missing people, I think of that. But that can also be the worst part in a way, because sometimes you just have those days when you just want to sit in front of your computer and just not speak to anybody, and then you have someone visiting, or that you have to do a tour or something. So, I mean, it has its pros and its cons, but I also love the variety. That's a big thing for me. I kind of like doing a whole lot of things, and it's been really nice that I'll have one day that I'm rushing up and down, moving boxes or painting a wall, and other days that I'm just dealing with school kids and covered in ochre powder, or things like that. So it's the variation in the job has been really cool.
No, that's really nice. Tim, I'm going to hand over to you for, I think, our last question, and then we're coming up on time now.
Yeah, so just quickly then, we have a lot of students who want to go into museums. What would your advice to them be in terms of what to expect if going into a career based in a museum?
I think there's so much variation. I mean, even just between what a curator does. I don't actually deal much with the museum exhibits, because the Rock Art Research Institute, it's mostly their material, so they deal with it. So it would have to depend on the museum and kind of see what work you're going to be doing. If you're wanting to get into the educational side, some curators don't deal with that at all, if you have an education person. But yeah, it would depend on the museum and the kind of work that you're wanting to do, and also just look at the organization. I feel very lucky that we have quite a lot of freedom. I know some of the government museums maybe don't. From what I've heard, we have quite a lot of freedom to try things, and to work with all the different specialists at WITS and collaborate a lot, which has been really nice. But yeah, for me, it's been really nice to come from an archaeology background and be able to incorporate research and museum activity.
Awesome. Well, Tammy, I think that wraps up a very interesting discussion. I'm sure we could carry on, because it really does sound exciting what's going on at Origin Centre. So we're gonna have to end it now, unfortunately. But obviously, thanks very much for your time and stuff. And I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point soon in the future with all these events happening at Origins. Maybe the next time we chat, there's a specific event maybe that you want to tell people about, for example. So yeah, so we look forward obviously to these events in the future. Hopefully we can actually attend them once this pandemic is over.
Yes, exactly.
So that's obviously a very important problem at the moment. But thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate the chat today.
Yeah,
thanks. It was nice to chat to you.
To all the people watching and listening, when the lockdown's over, go to Origin Centre. It's an amazing museum.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.